Get out of that dirt hole before it buries you alive." The wind tore through the frozen air as Thomas Reed pressed the final stone into the muddy wall of the dugout. His hands were numb, cracked and bleeding, but he didn't stop. Across the snow-covered prairie, the townspeople were laughing. Their tall wooden houses gleamed behind them like trophies of success, and they were certain of one thing: money and beauty meant safety. "You people live like animals," one man shouted. "Real homes are built above ground, not buried like graves." Thomas slowly turned. His wife Clara stood in the doorway, holding the wooden frame steady, her face calm but tense. Their little boy Noah sat inside on the dirt floor, watching silently. Thomas spoke quietly, but his words carried. "When the wind starts cutting through your walls like knives, you'll understand what a real home is." Above them, dark clouds rolled across the sky. They were not just bringing snow, they were bringing truth. The house nobody wanted in 1873, the Dakota Territory, was a place where only the prepared survived. The wind could tear a man apart, and the cold could steal his breath before he even realized he was dying. Thomas Reed was not like the other settlers. While the rest of the town built tall wooden homes with large windows and proud porches, Thomas dug into the earth. People called him foolish. They laughed at his low roof and dirt walls. They said his home looked like a grave. But Thomas had studied. He had read survival journals, listened to old pioneers, and learned from native settlers who knew the land. He knew the earth was the greatest natural shield. The ground held warmth in winter and coolness in summer. It blocked the wind and softened the cold. A dugout was not poverty, it was intelligence. Clara understood this even when others mocked her. Women in town whispered that her child would grow up ashamed, living in a hole in the ground. Clara did not answer them. She believed that safety was more important than pride. Little Noah felt something special inside the dugout. It was small and dark, but it felt warm and alive, like the earth itself was protecting him. One evening, the wind began to howl louder than ever before. Snow started falling fast. Thomas looked toward the sky and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. Clara pulled Noah close, and deep inside their simple dugout, the family waited as the prairie prepared to reveal who had truly built wisely. When the sky turned against them by dawn, the Dakota prairie no longer looked like land, it looked like a frozen ocean. Wind screamed across the open fields, hurling sheets of snow so thick that even nearby fences disappeared. The storm had arrived faster than anyone expected. The town's tall wooden houses, once symbols of pride and success, now stood exposed like fragile skeletons. Windows rattled violently. Roofs groaned. Inside the dugout, however, the air was strangely calm. Thomas lit a small oil lamp, its soft glow reflecting off the curved wooden roof. The thick earth walls held in warmth, and the wind could not reach them. This was not luck, it was physics. The soil acted as insulation, trapping heat and blocking the brutal cold outside. Thomas had chosen this design because he understood something the town did not. Nature cannot be defeated, but it can be respected. Clara wrapped Noah in a blanket, and the boy looked around, listening to the storm roar above them. He was scared, but he was not freezing. That difference mattered. Across town, people were panicking. Snow piled against doors, sealing families inside their expensive homes. The cold crept through wooden walls and shattered glass. Fires went out as the wind sucked warmth from every room. The same people who had laughed at Thomas were now praying their houses would hold. This storm was not just weather, it was a test of human thinking. Those who had built for appearance were now paying the price, while those who had built for survival were protected. Thomas sat beside Clara and spoke softly to Noah. "Remember this, son. Never build your life to impress others. Build it to protect what matters." The boy nodded, even if he did not fully understand yet. Hours passed, the storm grew worse. But inside the dugout the family remained alive, warm and together. And that was the greatest wealth anyone could have. When pride began to freeze, the blizzard did not slow down. It became stronger, louder, and more merciless with every passing hour. Snow slammed into the prairie so hard it felt like thousands of tiny stones striking the land. Entire buildings in town began to vanish behind white walls of wind. Inside many of those homes, people who had once mocked Thomas now sat wrapped in thin blankets, shivering as their fires died and the cold crept deeper into their bones. Wood cracked, windows shattered. The very walls they trusted were failing them. Pride was being stripped away by the storm, leaving only fear and regret. In the dugout, Thomas kept track of time by the small oil lamp. He knew that survival was not just about shelter but about calm thinking. Panic causes people to waste energy, and in a storm like this, energy was life. Clara warmed water over a small stove, using as little fuel as possible. She had learned from Thomas that careful planning mattered more than strength. Noah watched his parents and absorbed something no school could teach him, that intelligence is quiet and wisdom is often ignored until it is needed. Outside, the storm began to take lives. People tried to escape their freezing houses, but the wind pushed them back. Snow blinded them. Some collapsed only a few steps from their doors. The blizzard did not care about social status, money, or pride. It treated everyone the same. This was one of nature's greatest lessons, fairness without mercy. Thomas knew that when the storm eased, people would come. Not for help only, but for humility, and that humility would be more valuable than anything the storm destroyed. As Noah drifted into sleep, safe and warm, Thomas whispered a truth that would shape his son's future. The world will always laugh at those who prepare quietly, but when disaster comes, it is the quiet ones who save lives. The day the ground saved them, the storm finally began to weaken just before dawn on the third day, but it left behind a silence so heavy it felt louder than the wind had been. The Dakota prairie was no longer recognizable. Where homes once stood, there were now mounds of snow, collapsed roofs, and shattered timbers poking through like broken bones. Thomas slowly opened the dugout door, pushing against a wall of snow that had piled high overnight. Cold air rushed in, sharp and dry, but the earth-built shelter behind him still held its warmth. Clara and Noah stepped out carefully, blinking in the pale light of a sky that had gone from violent gray to a hollow white. What they saw stopped them in their tracks. The crowd that had laughed at them was gone. The tall wooden houses were crushed under snowdrifts, their windows blown out, their walls twisted and cracked. Barns had collapsed, burying animals inside. Smoke no longer rose from chimneys because there were no fires left to burn. It looked like a battlefield, except the enemy had been the weather. Thomas stood silently for a long moment. He did not feel pride, he felt sorrow. He had never wanted anyone to suffer. He had only wanted his family to live. Soon, he saw a movement. A figure stumbled through the snow toward the dugout, then another, and another. Men and women who had once mocked him were now barely able to walk, their faces pale, their lips blue, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. They looked at the dugout as if it were a miracle. Some fell to their knees in the snow. Thomas ran forward, helping them stand, guiding them inside. Clara and Noah moved quickly, making space, sharing blankets, pouring warm water. There was no hesitation. This was the final lesson of the storm. Survival means nothing if you lose your humanity. Inside the dugout, the air filled with quiet sobbing as people realized they were alive. People who had believed their money and status made them untouchable now understood how fragile they truly were. Thomas spoke to them gently, not to shame them but to teach them. He explained how the earth insulated the dugout, how the curved roof deflected wind, how planning and respect for nature had saved lives. This was not just a story of shelter, it was a story of humility. Over the next days, the dugout became the heart of what was left of the town. People worked together to dig out survivors, share food, and rebuild. No one laughed anymore. The storm had taken their arrogance and left behind something far more valuable: understanding. Noah watched it all, seeing how quickly power and pride could disappear and how kindness and knowledge could bring people back from the edge of death. Years later, when he told this story, he would not talk about the snow or the wind. He would talk about how a simple dugout taught a town that real strength is not about looking impressive. It is about being prepared, being humble, and being willing to protect others when the world turns cold.